helping you make the most of your retirement. This is the Retirement Years Podcast. Here are your hosts, Mary Ellen French and Dave Wing.
Hi there, I'm Mary Ellen.
And I'm Dave, and today we'll talk about facing the challenges of decluttering your living space. As you consider moving to a smaller space, another home, another living arrangement, whatever it might be. And we'll be speaking with an expert who will help you right-size your living space by focusing on what you need to keep and what you need to give away, throw away, or repurpose.
Yeah, I don't know if most listeners are like me or if I'm unique, but I cannot believe how quickly stuff accumulates in my house. We moved from a 4-bedroom, 2-story house with a full basement in 2020 during the pandemic. And so we were downsizing because our kids were at a stage where we thought they were moving out. Haha. Yeah. So we moved into a 1-bedroom on the main floor, semi-detached with a couple of small bedrooms in the basement. And like we had 2 storage lockers. It was embarrassing. And it took us 4 years to finally get everything out of the storage lockers and either given away or thrown away or moved into this house. And so now my basement is a disaster zone. On my list, but not very high on the priority list. So I just and then let's talk about, emptying out the farmhouse where my parents lived. When my dad died in 2018, we slowly, got rid of things, purged some stuff, and tore down the summer kitchen. That was the sort of the back half of the house, tore that down and built a brand new 900 square foot space for my mom to move into. And so she was thrilled when we finally got that done and she got to move in. She literally brought a chair and the TV and her bedroom set. And I think that was it because she was kind of done with all the other stuff. And so so we slowly got rid of that. But that was several months and a lot of effort on the part of my 4 siblings and other family members. So yeah, this is not for the faint of heart.
No, and it's not easy. There's always, I don't think, are you really even a couple if one of you doesn't want to keep everything and the other one says, let's get rid of everything? I think that unless you've had that argument, I'm not even sure you're close. Speaking to that, my siblings and I had that similar experience because of our parents passing away. Suddenly, there was absolutely no prep. We had no idea what they even had or where it was hidden, and we're finding stuff, and it just felt so wrong because as kids you grew up with respect for your parents' things. Now we're poking through everything because we have to, and that's clothes and drawers and all of that stuff. So it was not a very happy time. But then the amount of stuff, and they did not have a large living space at all, living over top of the store, but it sure seemed like it when you start dragging it out at a piece at a time. And there is a lot of emotional guilt because you're trying to make decisions about, did they value this? Did they want someone to have it? And we didn't have any of that to help us out. So doing that a little proactively, and we'll learn more about that today, is just again, like last time's topic, it's a gift to the people who will be dealing with it, because we had no idea what we were doing and just knew we had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've talked before on the podcast about, how difficult it is for most people to talk about death, right? Yeah. And so when you've got older adults who've been in the same home for decades, sometimes there is really far too much stuff that got collected when only 1 or 2 people are still living there, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's better to have conversations about transitions to other living spaces, or at least decluttering the current space early and often.
Yeah. And that brings us to today's topic. And one of those big transitions is moving. Whether you're young or old, it's not easy. And if you haven't sort of kept up on your decluttering, it's going to be a chore. And we spoke with Jeannine Bryant, who is a fabulous person. And Jeannine grew up in on a farm in rural North Dakota. And you'll hear when she's speaking to us that she had a lot of time to hang around old people. And she said,
Hmm.
I mean that as a term of endearment. And
Yeah.
she learned a lot from them. But she would help some of those older adults deal with their stuff. And she liked it. She liked the organizing and making things make sense. And so she has a senior move management company in Lincoln, Nebraska, a team of individuals who go out and help declutter homes and take things away for them. And she uses the phrase right sizing. And that's what caught our eye. But well,
Yeah.
we've heard of downsizing. What is right sizing? And it's she goes over a process that is necessary to help determine if you have the right amount of stuff, or in most cases, if you're asking the question, probably too much stuff. And her website is called, and we'll have this on our website, easyrightsizing.com. And she has a wealth of information, and the resources are free. And Jeannine shared with us her passion for organizing and how she helps others to right size their living situation. And here's what she had to say. Jeannine, thank you so much for joining us. And in this season of transitions that we're doing on the podcast, what expertise you brings to what you bring to it is perfect, because it's all about helping people with a very difficult transition, and that's changing a bit of their life in either purging some items or not. So the service that you provide, one of the terms, of course, that we're going to be using today is right sizing. We're going to want to know more about that. But before we get into that, tell us a bit, Jeannine, about yourself and what brought you to this as a career.
Sure, yeah. I have been in the senior move management space now since 2010.
Mm.
And I grew up, I always loved organizing, and I grew up surrounded by old people. And I use that term old people with love.
Right.
I grew up a mile from one set of grandparents and a mile and a half from another set of grandparents. I grew up in rural North Dakota, and so my folks were farmers. Both sets of my grandparents were farmers. We had a great aunt and uncle who came around every holiday. And so every holiday, several times a year, we just had this gathering of old people at our house. And my brother and I were the only kids. And growing up in a small community and going to church every Sunday, and then after church, you go downstairs to the basement for coffee and donuts. And you just really, I was lucky enough to be immersed in this culture of older adults, and I always, just felt very comfortable around them. And I thought, so I didn't start my senior move management business. A former business partner of mine had started this idea of helping seniors downsize and move. And when I met her back in 2009, I thought, oh, this is a job perfectly designed for my skills and my abilities. This thought about organizing and decluttering and helping seniors. And so I fell in love with the business, and so then I started in 2010, and I've just been loving it ever since.
Well, and it's great to do something you love, and it benefits others for sure. Um, Many of us, or virtually everyone, is familiar with the term downsizing. Sometimes it's used in business, but when we move to a new home or a new living space, whatever it happens to be. But what exactly is right sizing? Because I think there's probably an important distinction.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't come up with that term right sizing, but I've kind of adopted it because I feel like it has such a more positive spin than downsizing.
Right.
Now, most of our clients, most of the people that I work with are moving from a larger home to a smaller home. And so they're giving up half or more of their square footage, which means they have to give up half or more of their stuff.
Right.
But really, downsizing, it has this kind of negative connotation, when really my goal is not to make people get rid of all of their stuff. My goal is to help them identify their best stuff so that they can keep the best
Right.
and let go of the rest, I always say. And so really it's finding that perfect place between too much and too little, just the right amount, like the Goldilocks story, right? And so that's why I really have kind of attached myself to that term right sizing. So there's so many people who are living in a house that fit their needs and their family, 20 years ago, maybe when they had
Yep.
kids in the home. And now, as the kids have grown and moved out, maybe they're still living in this 2-story, 4 or 5 bedroom house, and it's just them and their spouse, or if their spouse has passed away, it's just them.
Right.
There's entire rooms in the home that they're not using, or an entire floor. Maybe they never go down to the basement anymore. They're not living in the right size house, and they're not using all of their stuff. And so it's always my goal to help people identify just what's the right space for you and the right amount of stuff for
Right.
you to live your best life.
And I think, to be honest, that would come easier from someone that isn't necessarily a family member, or like you can come into it with no emotional attachment to the stuff,
Mhm.
and you're the neutral party. So I think it's easier said than done. I know that
Yes,
it could be,
yes.
but you're telling them what they need to hear.
And there's also no emotional baggage there in the
Right.
relationship between, me and the person,
Yeah.
because we work with families all the time and family dynamics, and I have my own family dynamics, right? But um, so often we hear from adult children like, oh, well, when you said this, that really struck home with our mother because the expert said it. And
Right.
I'm thinking, I've been saying that for years. Why don't you listen to me?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just different when you listen to a third party.
And on sort of related to that, on your website, you use the term emotional clutter. And anyone I know, if they've got a place to live, they've got stuff, and they've got stuff they may need, and likely a lot of stuff they don't need, but so many things they're attached to. And I'm guilty too, even though I'm an organized person and I hate clutter. There are things that, for reasons only known to me, I would hang on to. So how do you go about helping someone that deal with that, or the family or the individual deal with that emotional clutter?
Yeah. Downsizing our stuff is a challenge, but the hardest category I found of stuff to let go of is that keepsake clutter, the clutter
Mhm.
that has emotional ties to it. And I've written a couple books on the downsizing process, and one of them is called Keep the Memories, Not the Stuff. And that is all we talk about in that book, is that keepsake clutter. And there's
Yeah.
really a couple different kinds. There's the keepsake clutter that we have kept for ourselves, so our own keepsakes. This is like our wedding dress, or maybe even our kids' baby clothes, things
Right.
like that, things we've
Mhm.
accumulated throughout our life. But what's even harder, I think, for a lot of people is that inherited keepsake clutter that they get when a loved one passes away. So when your parents pass away, when a sibling passes away, a spouse, you're having to empty out a loved one's home after
Yeah.
they die, and maybe you're probably doing it in a hurry because you need to sell the house, or you need to stop paying rent on that apartment. And you've heard that term, clutter is just postponed decisions. It's hard in that space when you're mourning a loved one to make all of those decisions. So you think, whatever, I'm just going to pack it up, bring it over to my house. I've got room in my basement.
Right.
And then here we wait, we look up 4, 5, 6 years later, and all that stuff is still down in the basement. And so the the best way to help someone let go of that emotional clutter is to really, first of all, give them permission to let go and help them to get in the right frame of mind to let go. And the way we do that is by really accepting and understanding deep in ourselves that stuff and memories and love are not the same thing.
Right.
So how many objects we keep from a loved one is in no way related to how much we loved them, or how much we will remember them, or how much we miss them.
Yeah.
They're just two completely separate things. And just because we let go of the stuff does not mean we're gonna forget our loved one. Um, and so I always encourage people, again, I use that phrase, keep the best and let go of the rest, when it comes to keepsakes too.
Yeah.
So if you have a loved one who has died and you have a bunch of their belongings, really take the time to carefully sort through and curate the most meaningful objects to you, not the most meaningful things that they loved, right? If
Right.
they have a
Yeah.
collection of Hummel figurines, if that doesn't pull on your heartstrings, you don't have to keep it. Keep the things that pull on your heartstrings and let the rest of it go, because a curated collection is so much more meaningful than just keeping everything, right? Because
Yeah.
we can't live in a museum. And yeah, that's why I really encourage people to understand that stuff and memories are not connected.
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent perspective, because you could get in the frame of mind, I got to keep everything, that was that reminds me of the first whatever, but
Yeah.
that the most important, or the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we've discussed on the podcast about open communication on a variety of topics, for example, death or the planning for death, and how important that is to do while it's unemotional.
Yes.
And you provide resources to help facilitate that dialogue to sort of tamp down the anxiety and the tension. So can you describe that a bit?
Yeah, I think that's such a good it's such good advice to have those conversations early and often.
Yeah,
I have to say, I'm in the stage of my life where I'm raising kids. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. And the advice is the same when they talk to parents about talking to your kids about puberty and sex and like those grown-up decisions. They
right,
say talk about it early and often before it's awkward. And I think the same thing goes for death. It's not a sad conversation when you're preparing for that stage of life, when no one has a diagnosis, no one's on hospice, then it's not sad.
you're right.
If you wait until the end, then it's sad and it's heavy. And so, yeah, on my website, easyrightsizing.com, I do provide a lot of free downloadable resources. And the reason I do that is because I want to help families prepare and really kind of lay out some plans. None of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds, but we can be as prepared as we can. And so some of those resources I've got on there, one is called a future needs assessment. And it's really just kind of a worksheet that you can sit down with your loved ones, with your parents or with your adult children and just talk about, I don't know what is life going to look like for me in 1 year, in 3 years, in
Yeah.
5 years? Is this house going to work? Another resource I have is called the Legacy Letter Template. So it helps people really think about, what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want to leave behind in my children? P.S. It's not about the stuff you leave behind. It's
Yeah.
about so much more. I also have just a sample agenda for a family meeting. And I
Oh,
think the holidays are a perfect time to have those family meetings. Like,
yes.
hey, kids, your dad and I are thinking that this yard and this house is getting to be a lot of work. And in the next couple of years, we're probably going to be downsizing. So we're going to start looking around at our options. We're going to talk to our financial advisor, just to have those conversations early and
Right.
often, because then it just kind of lowers the stakes for everyone and makes it easier.
Yeah, it certainly does. Um, you also do presentations, go out and speak to groups or organizations, and as part of my job, I used to have presentations and loved it. It was my favorite part of the job. Throw out 50 things, and then the subtitle,
Yeah.
you won't even miss them. That caught my eye because I have a family that could benefit from the presentation. So I'm intrigued. Without the entire list, and maybe we'll have you back, we'll go through the entire list, but
Yeah.
um, what are some of those items and what's the rationale? Because I think it would benefit anyone at any stage, whether they're thinking of right
Yes.
sizing or they're they're happy in their home, but
Yeah.
they could declutter a bit.
Yes, anyone at any age. I mean, if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever decade you're in, I think you could benefit from this because let's face it, we all have too much stuff, right? We all have stuff in our houses that we don't use, we don't need, we don't love. And someone else in our community can be using them and loving them and maybe needs them. So let's
Yeah.
get them out of our house and get them into their hands. So that presentation, yeah, throw out 50 things. I always say it's not really throw out. I just want you to get them out of your house. I want you
Right.
to hopefully donate them, maybe sell them. And sometimes, yes, there is trash that we need to toss out. But it's basically a list of 10 categories of items that are the most common clutter things that we see time and time again in our work. And I challenge people to let go of 5 items in each of those 10 categories.
Right.
And then voila, your house is 50 items lighter. Now, a lot of people can sit through that presentation and realize, okay, I don't need to throw out 50 things. I maybe need to throw out 500 things, but let's
Yeah.
start with 50.
Yeah.
And so just a couple of those categories, common struggles, common clutter areas that a lot of people struggle with: books,
Right.
clothing, holiday decorations. All of these things are categories of items that just tend to build up over time. And when we live in a home for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the outflow of our stuff rarely matches the inflow of our stuff,
Mhm.
right? We're constantly getting new stuff. We go shopping, we get mail, we get presents. Things come into our home at a much faster pace than at which they leave the home. And so suddenly you open up your utensil drawer and you have 4 cheese cutters. You don't need
Right.
4 cheese cutters, right? And so I challenge people to go through each of those categories and just try to pull out 5 things. And that might be a good practice that everyone can do, maybe even quarterly, 4 times a year,
Yeah.
go through your home and pull and get rid of 50 things.
As you were saying that, before Jeannine and I started, we were talking about the weather. She didn't initiate. I'm old. I did, but I was going through a closet in the basement, and I was pulling through coats because it's snowy and windy out today. And I looked at one coat and said, "Whose coat's that? It's mine." That's how long since I've even looked
Exactly.
at it, let alone put it on. And a comedian that's a very much a favorite of mine, Jerry Seinfeld, has a bit on our houses are actually uh, junk processors that things
Yes.
come in, we
Yes.
put them out on display, then we move them to where people can't see them, then they go to the basement, and once they go to the garage, that's it. They never has junk come back from the garage. And he does a whole bit on it. And he's
I
absolutely,
know.
it
I
is sort
love
of
that bit. I
it is
love
the
it.
cycle. Yeah. Yeah. Of course you've heard it. So Jeannine, you mentioned your website, and if you could tell us that again, and I don't know, you did list some of the resources, if there's any others you want to list that are there, but I know when I went there, and this is the truth, up in the spare bedroom, because we have a spare bedroom because it's just two of us now in a 4-bedroom house, there is a box that's convenient to put things in that have to go.
Yes. I love
So
it.
I'm learning. Who says you
Good.
can't learn? An old guy. Yeah.
Yes. I
So
had someone call it a get rid of box. Yes. I mean that is one of my best tips is to just always have a box somewhere in your home that it always lives in that spot. For me, I have a Rubbermaid tote container. It's in our master closet. Everyone in the family knows when we come across something that we're ready to let go of, it just goes in that box. And then I don't know, 6 times a year that box gets filled up, and that's the signal to me, okay, I'm going to put it all in a trash bag and I'm going to bring it over to the donation place. And if you declutter a couple bags of stuff 6 times a year, every year that you're in your house, you can stay somewhat on top of things. Things still tend to build up, but
yeah.
yeah, I've got a whole bunch of resources and tips, videos, interviews that I've done over on my website, easyrightsizing.com. I really designed it because I want it to be a helpful resource to anyone, anywhere who needs to declutter and downsize. I have a senior move management business in Lincoln, Nebraska, in the USA, and we help seniors who are downsizing and moving. And I've got a team of 25, and we actually go into the home and help people sort, and we do the packing and the unpacking, and we run estate sales and everything. And the reason I developed my sister brand of this easyrightsizing.com is because I would get phone calls from people outside of our geographic region saying, I've heard about your company and I really need your help. And I would love to help everyone, but I can't send my team members, all across the country
Right.
to help downsize. And so I really want to provide the resources and the inspiration to do it yourself. And that's what I'm doing over there at easyrightsizing.com. I've also written a few books on the downsizing process that are available there. And I even have an online course to walk people through the downsizing process. It's over 3 hours of video content of me really kind of taking the viewer by the hand and walking them through. If you're planning to move, this is how to do it efficiently, effectively, and with as least stress as possible.
And that's such an important resource because I know there's listeners on our podcast, there's people around the world that are in a home and they look at it and think, I don't have the energy to
Yeah,
move. Even though it's
they're
way too
stuck.
much house, but
Yeah.
what would I ever do? I would be 4 years doing this process. So
Right.
having someone that can come in like that, like with a crew and the expertise would be so helpful and get someone moved. And then there's another family that's going to benefit from having the right size house
Absolutely, you're
who's
so right.
expanding.
I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely. When you move out, I mean, in my neighborhood, I know there's so many older folks, or maybe even single folks who've lost a spouse and they're living in these gigantic homes. And I don't think it feels good for them to live in a home that's not, as full as it used to be with their family. And then I think about all these families who are expanding, who need these bigger homes. I mean, For everyone to get into the right size house and have the right amount of stuff, everyone benefits,
Yep.
right? And our life does go through cycles. And so there is a time in your life when you are ramping up your stuff and ramping up your space. But then, as we were talking earlier, as you get older, I always say, we all get organized eventually. We just might not be around for it. That's a quote by a professional organizer, Sue DeRoos, and it's so true. Someone's going to
Yes.
have to deal with our stuff.
Yep.
Either it's us or it's those we leave behind. And so when I think that confronting your possessions in later life is the responsible thing to do for many reasons. So
That's true. So, Jeannine, one of the things I love of Mary Ellen and I love about the podcast is meeting interesting people from everywhere. And if you'd have told me 2 or 3 years ago I was going to be speaking with someone wonderful from Lincoln, Nebraska, I'd say, sure, yeah, I might be. I would have doubted that. So we can't thank you enough for taking time to speak to us today. And who knows, our paths could cross again. And hopefully it's inspired some people to take even a tentative step forward to decluttering their life and getting into that right size situation. So thank you so much.
absolutely. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So just do it in 10, 15, 20-minute increments. Thank you so much, David. This was so fun.
Thanks.
So I loved the advice that Jeannine gave about talking about how difficult it is to deal with in what she called inherited clutter, right? I liked that phrase. And that was, the feeling that you have to keep items after somebody dies, like a spouse or a parent. Because as you mentioned earlier, right, there's so much respect there for the person that you have then transferred over to their things.
Yeah.
And so you end up packing up their things like, articles of clothing or whatever. And then you're keeping it out of love and loyalty to the person. And you're, not really separating the emotion that you feel about the person,
Yeah.
not separating that from their things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if anyone listening is about to enter into a decluttering situation or they've been through it and they're storing stuff, I loved what Jeannine said about stuff and memories are not the same thing. And the number of objects or things that you keep from someone is not a measure of your love for them. And that you
Right.
have to go through those items and say, this one speaks to me or this one's important. Well, then
Yeah.
that's one you probably should keep. And that should be a minimal number of things.
Yeah.
And I think that is very important if you're going through that or you didn't do it well, you didn't because you can't get in your shed,
Yeah.
then I think that gives you permission to go back and reevaluate. And maybe someone might love those things that
Yeah.
you tucked away. And I think the person who's gone would love to have it end up that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I really liked the free resources that are on Jeannine's website. So her website is easyrightsizing.com. One of the resources on there is a sample agenda for a family meeting so that you can discuss future plans like downsizing. I really liked that. And then there's another resource that provides tips for having a house cooling party.
Yeah.
So the opposite of a house warming party, right? A house cooling party. I love that. And so that's a party where you invite your friends and your loved ones to your home before you leave it to right size to a new place.
Right.
And so like a housewarming party, you enjoy food, you take lots of pictures, but at the house cooling party, you have the guests help you with the keep, donate, and throw away process. And I thought that was really cool. It really, it makes it more of a positive experience because transitioning out of one home and into another, like you said, is a daunting task. And so sometimes there's some sadness associated with it. And I thought the house cooling party was a really awesome way to celebrate everything that that house gave you as an individual or as a family. I really like that. So yeah, I would encourage listeners to take the time to check out Jeannine's website, which is easyrightsizing.com.
And I like the idea, even visually, I'm seeing people leaving my house cooling party with stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, they came the first time housewarming and brought me stuff that maybe I needed, maybe I didn't. But
Yep.
this way, yeah. Oh, you like that glass, whatever it is? Be a
All
lot
yours.
easier if I'm alone with them too for that taking away. I'd already have it on the lawn. So a great guest, and we really thank Jeannine for taking time to be with us. And if you go by her website and watch any of her videos, you'll see why we instantly took a liking to her. And of course, things roll on the Retirement Years podcast. And for next week, we invite you to join us again because we're going to speak to someone who literally took right sizing and living your dreams in retirement to new heights. Like someone who right sized down to a few boxes, but then decided to make the leap to move to Spain.
Yeah.
And we'll hear from that individual on our next week on our podcast and see how she chose to move to a new country and start a new way of life in retirement. Until then, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mary Ellen. Stay well.
You have been listening to the Retirement Years podcast. Social media marketing and management provided by Madison Sloan at MSS Mad Media. Original music by Theodora Draper. Web design by Gavin Hinton.